Hi, and welcome to another episode at The Informed Perspective. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. We're really glad that you're here. This is a space where we explore what it means to build strong, thoughtful communities, starting locally, but always with an eye on the bigger picture. As the name suggests, we believe real change starts by listening, truly listening to different voices and lived experiences. Our conversations often begin close to home, but spark wider reflection, foster empathy, and help shape deeper connections wherever you are. This month, we're dedicating our conversations to inclusivity, which naturally has brought us along to today's vital topic, body image. No matter where people come from, one issue keeps coming up, and that is the pressure to be attractive and conform to narrow societal ideals. But what is beauty really? Surely it's too complex to fit into a box. As the saying goes, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So why do so many of us, regardless of age, still tie our self-worth to appearance? Whether it's being thin enough, muscly enough, having the right nose, wrinkle-free skin, or no cellulite, why are we still measuring happiness by the number on the scales? We advocate for inclusivity and acceptance, but clearly we still have a long way to go. At Tween Talk, our space for 9 to 13-year-olds, we see just how early these pressures emerge to fit in, not stand out, wear the right clothes, have the right body, and this quiet conformity chips away at confidence and individuality and burdens mental health. Some 10 and 11-year-olds at Tween Talk already express feeling too fat and have started avoiding meals. Worse still, these harmful conversations spread quickly. In a world flooded with filtered images and narrow ideals, body image anxiety often begins in childhood. Research from Durham University shows that our perceptions of body image can start forming as early as the age of 7, mirrored by studies showing the influence of skinny dolls on children as young as 5 even. And so the questions begin. Where do I fit on this scale of beauty? Am I too tall, too short, too fat, too thin? It's not only about wanting to be thinner. While many struggle with disordered eating and shrinking themselves, others, especially those facing obesity, deal with stigma, exclusion, and serious health risks. Conversely, those naturally thin or struggling to gain weight feel misunderstood, judged, or invalidated. Body image affects people of every size and background. And despite advances in mental health, nutrition, and self-acceptance, we remain trapped in cycles of shame and comparison. We continue to be bombarded by narrow beauty ideals. Slim, waif-like women and heavily muscled men dominate reality TV and social media. For most, these images are unattainable. What messages are we sending the next generation about confidence, diversity, and self-worth? Why are diet pills on the shelves, and why do teenagers and adults keep reaching for them? From laxative and diuretics to protein shakes and dangerous trends like dry scooping, a generation is internalizing harmful habits, often during critical physical and emotional development stages. And these behaviors can have long-term consequences. Poor nutrition, distorted self-image, and serious health risks such as bone loss, hormonal disruption, heart problems, fertility issues, digestive disorders, hair loss, and even unwanted hair growth, potentially also on the face or in other unwanted areas. Neurological symptoms are also potentially possible. Despite our knowledge about nutrition and health, many turn also to cosmetic surgery to chase impossible standards. Why haven't we shrugged these off years ago? Maybe it's because this stigma and trauma runs so deep. Adults have internalized the too fat narrative and never fully healed. And now we're passing this damage onto our kids. We still tell people they look great when they lose weight. We still look critically in the mirror every day. But who are we trying to measure ourselves against? And when will we finally celebrate and be proud of ourselves as we are? With fitness apps tracking every step, workouts counted obsessively, and a non-stop bombardment of airbrushed images and AI-enhanced photos online, the pressure's only getting worse. So that eating disorders can become a thing of the past, how can we change this and encourage our children to aspire to health instead of perfection? We maybe need to ask tougher questions, not only of the media and the industry, but also of ourselves. And we only have one body, and if we don't start treating it with the care and respect it deserves, What are we setting ourselves up for further down the line? So I would now like to add just a few quotes, as we always do on our podcast, just to get it rolling. And my first quote is by Yancy Lale, author of Soulful Skincare. Our culture is obsessed with perfection, especially when it comes to the way women look. The parameters of acceptability, as far as physical appearance go, are so limiting that only a handful of women actually fall into this category. And the rest of us are left to either squeeze ourselves into molds that don't fit, hating ourselves all the while, or we just give up entirely. And Naomi Wolf, The Beauty Myth. Today's children and young men and women have sexual identities that spiral around paper and celluloid phantoms, from Playboy to music videos to the blank female torsos in women's magazines, features obscured and eyes extinguished. They are being imprinted with a sexuality that is mass-produced, deliberately dehumanizing and inhuman. And Sherry K. Erdman, the author, even the models we see in magazines wish like they could look like their own images. And Victoria Vantock, the writer and journalist, most of us know that the media tells us our bodies are imperfect. Even the prettiest bombshell has body insecurities. Make the choice to appreciate your body as it is. And Arlene van Oorschot, author and speaker, beauty is a fleeting gift. Take care not to invest your entire self-worth in it. And Naomi Wolf, a cultural fixation on female thinness is not an obsession about female beauty, but an obsession about female obedience. And finally, Dr. Anita Johnston, clinical psychologist and author of Eating in the Light of the Moon. An eating disorder is often not about food at all. It's a language, a way of communicating pain, unmet needs, and a cry for autonomy in an environment where those things feel unsafe or impossible. So now I'm going to pass to Jenny to introduce our wonderful guests today.
Thank you, Penny. We've got two amazing guests today with their professional perspectives on body image and eating disorders, and I'm really excited to introduce them and get this conversation going. So we've got Thomas Midgley, who's the founding director of the Body Image Treatment Clinic, Harley Street, London. He's a registered cognitive behavioural psychotherapist with the BABCP and a highly specialised eating disorders dietitian, accredited by both the British Dietetic Association and the HCPC. With over 20 years of experience in the NHS and private sector, Thomas has worked extensively with adolescents and adults in the fields of eating disorders, personality disorders, and complex trauma. At the heart of his work is body image, a subject he's particularly known for. He's trained in compassion-focused therapy, schema therapy, and DBT, and he delivers NICE recommended treatments for eating disorders like CBT-E, mantra, and family-based therapy. A regular media contributor and international speaker, Thomas offers a compassionate, evidence-based take on body image. And Jenny Tomei is a qualified eating disorder therapist, nutritional therapist, and personal trainer. She runs her own practice supporting clients with eating disorders, body image issues, gut health, and weight concerns. Her non-profit, JenUp, delivers workshops in schools and communities focused on early intervention and recovery. Her work is inspired by her own journey through anorexia, which she now uses to help others find healing and hope. So over to you, Penny, to start with the questions.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to diving into this conversation. But just before we do, I wanted to share a few statistics because I think that kind of puts some things into perspective. So currently in England, nearly 3 in 10 adults are classified as obese. And for kids aged 2 to 15, it's almost the same, around 27%. In the US, the CDC says more than 2 in 5 adults and 1 in 5 kids and teens are living with obesity. The World Health Organization projects that by 2030, more than half of Europe could be affected, and some countries might see rates as high as 89%. Globally, in 2024, over 35 million kids under 5 were overweight. But that's, of course, only part of the picture. We've also got eating disorders such as anorexia. So in the US, over 20 million women and 10 million men will experience an eating disorder in their lives. Anorexia in particular is the deadliest mental health disorder, and people with it are 18 times more likely to die early than others their age. In the UK, the charity Beat estimates 1.25 million people are living with disorders right now, and surprisingly, 1 in 4 are men. And that really challenges the old idea that eating disorders are just a women's issue, right? And the impact is massive. A 2020 study found that eating disorders cost us over 3 million years of healthy life each year because of death, disability, infertility, and a lower quality of life. And I think another really important thing to look at is also how medical students might be getting insufficient training on eating disorders. Apparently, that's about 2 hours of training, with only 1% of doctors getting clinical experience with eating disorder patients. And in the UK, people often wait over 3 years from becoming ill to actually getting treatment. So with that all in mind, Thomas, I'd like to come to you. You have said something really powerful, that nobody should be dying of an eating disorder in 2025. And I'd love to hear from you. What are the key changes that we need to be seeing? And I think it's quite a large question, potentially asked in healthcare and in society, and also about awareness. I'll throw it out to you and just let it roll.
Okay, it's helpful to mention there, this statement comes from a movement which is Dump the Scales, which is trying to get the government to change its focus to help people with eating disorders. And in my own professional experience, I've specialized in the treatment of complex presentations and individuals labeled as severe and enduring, and for the last 15 years. And in my experience, these are highly treatable conditions, and yet we are seeing, and not just young people dying, but an increasing number of young people dying. And so it's not just a statement, it's also my experience and conviction in relation to that statement. If I start with healthcare and just name a few bits, that's probably for people to understand. At its core, that one of the main issues is funding. And I'll throw a couple of stats out as well. So the highest mortality factors for all age ranges under 50 are all mental health. So it's mental health conditions that are killing our adolescents, our young people, our young adults, our older adults. And it's only where physical health starts taking over in the kind of 50s, 60s, 70s. And even then, a massive amount of that's driven or related to mental health, the impact of depression, the impact of eating and obesity, the impact of substance abuse on cardiac function, and all the other physical factors. And yet, knowing that this being the case, the government spends 150 billion a year on physical health, and yet around 15 billion on mental health. So we have consecutive governments, we have a healthcare system that is highly focused on extending the health of our aging population at the expense, very much so, of our younger population. So adding a few years on at the end and losing decades from those that are younger. And not just that, the amount of money is increasing in physical healthcare proportionally while reducing in mental health care. Despite the government pledging more money, that still will be a reduction comparative to the increases in physical health. So we have a culture that is focused and driven on physical health, and where mental health not only has a branding issue, but there's a severe issue in underfunding. And then how that's impacting on the front lines. I can tell stories about why I left the NHS, and it relates to this. We built a service from only a handful of part-time people until we created a service that in West London that was, I think by the time we reached our peak, we had one admission for adult one inpatient admissions. We were saving, I forgot the figures, like $250,000 a year compared before. But yet through efficiency savings and people's budgets and bonuses, they culled the service to save money for certain individuals. And where those patients immediately went was the private sector. I then moved to the private sector hospital, a big brand, who changed from treating all private clients to only taking the overflow from the NHS because of the service cut. So it cost the taxpayer considerably more money. That's a little bit of a side rant. But It's kind of go back to that main element that we've got this massive, how is that impacting? Well, what we're getting is, from a society perspective, we're getting this increase in mortality in young people, increased death from suicide, increased death from from eating disorders. We're getting this improved life expectancy in our aging and elderly population. And at the same time, in terms of eating disorders, we're getting these huge waiting lists. So extended waiting lists for treatments. And then the services are massively overwhelmed because they're underfunded. So the clinicians are targeting the most severe cases. But to target those severe cases, what they're doing is they're not treating the cases that may be at slightly higher weight, who are losing weight, and they're targeting the most high risk, which makes sense. But the problem is what we know from research and treatment, if you catch the conditions early enough, you need to put a lot less input to get much better long-term outcomes. But we're not able to do that. So we have a system that's waiting for these people to get more severe and treated, because we don't have the services to actually be able to do it anyways. So, and I can move on to different elements, but I guess we'll move on to other areas. I'll put that out to you guys.
Yeah, what early interventions, Thomas, would those be? I mean, I'm sort of thinking now probably coaching or earlier therapies. What sort of suggestions are there that potentially we could put more weight onto earlier on that then might help further down the line?
Well, my specialism is in terms of helping individuals recover from their conditions. I mean, actually, Jenny will be great to talk about more kind of thinking about prevention and that side of it. But from that side, in other words, when you get somebody in early, it's so much easier to help that person then to change behaviors, be able to get them the support they need to be able to change that direction, help them recover, and put the things in place that help them actually. Because to help somebody recover from an eating disorder, particularly anorexia, it's what you have to do is to help them develop something that's better than their anorexia, so that can favorably compete against it. But for someone with anorexia, that doesn't compute, because it's the best thing they've had. It's the thing that's generated the most sense of confidence and empowerment and agency. As per some of those quotes that were very good and very powerful, you have to get them to find something that competes favorably. Otherwise, they're never going to change and give it up. And you can do that when somebody is first in it and they're younger. You can get that change early on. You can still help people recover at any point. They just need that motivation. But when they're first going into it and they're only building the neural pathways for that behavior, it's early on, it's easier to shift track and help somebody recover than it is someone who's been in that cycle for a very long time. So this is the challenge that we have. That it's just, we're not funding mental health. We're not trying to help our young people. And you can get slightly into politics about, but what are who've got the voting masses? What do the politicians want to appease within this context? But these are the facts of it, and this is the statistics, and this is the direction we're going, and it is not going to get any better.
And the fundamental, what you're bringing to the table, and the fundamental approach is, it's reactive when there's a crisis or there's a breaking point or there's the emergency. Penny and I are based in Europe, in Poland, and we've experienced there's different experiences, but it's much more preventative. They will go and explore, not in this scenario necessarily, but you can see with the approach they're much more investigative, and it's just very different than the NHS. You're just, because there isn't the funding, and the resources, and it's not necessarily the case here, but they're very much like, let's explore everything there, let's see what can be done, so it's not going to get any further, rather than see how you get on, or wait 6 months, 9 months as well. And I think it's that mindset that needs to change, and that's across many political spectrums, whoever comes into power. It's that fundamental mindset. And the other thing I just wanted you to just to touch back on, Thomas, when you said about you mentioned the Dump the Scales campaign or initiative, is that in essence essentially, forget what the numbers are saying, it's about how you are, and that then links to your mental health? Can you just tell us a little bit more about that? Because
it relates to this, that it links this element about it's what I said there, that we need to realize that individuals, yes, when people are at very low rate, they're very high risk. But because someone isn't at low rate, it doesn't mean they're not high risk. And it's that point that services is just doing that. And the point of the government is, if someone in a bigger body is restricting, hasn't eaten practically any carbohydrates for 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, that can start creating a set of medical complications that can be fatal if someone goes highly restricted. But if they walked into A&E and somebody, and they were having symptoms of malnutrition and they were in a bigger body, that's highly unlikely to be looked into. And it goes to the kind of also this next point, that there is the training for frontline staff is just not there. And I don't want to start bashing frontline staff within this, but in all the years, and I mean, I've worked, as I said, well over 20 years in this domain. And when I've sent people to A&E, I send with them a letter detailing what I'm looking for and what tests I want them to do and why and the rationale, because these clinicians have no experience of treating malnutrition, any of the risk factors to kind of manage that. And that's just A&E. And it's the same with GPs. It's the same within these medical professions are very good at physical and medical healthcare, but where there's, and it isn't just knowledge, sadly, and people aren't going to want to hear this, but working in these professions with clinics, the compassion towards individuals who are in medical institutions with mental health issues is very low. So if someone is dying of anorexia and they're on a medical unit, and the compassion from the staff tends to be considerably lower than it might be for someone with a child with an obvious, more physical manifestation. And that also speaks of the huge lack of insight into these conditions. And that's just common. That's just a common feature I hear all the time. And I've experienced working, because I've worked in medical units for years, as well as psychiatric and psychology units. So I have that experience on both sides. In fact, it's what got me into eating disorder. I was working in a gastrosurgical unit, and I was asked to start treating 2 women with anorexia who were brought there to die. They were young women, and they were just on a no feed, and and my role was to try and encourage them to eat, even though there was no interest in that. They were written off. And this is also an element at the moment with the problem we've got at the moment with I forgot its name, the bill that the governments are looking at relating to assisted suicide. It has the potential of having a huge impact on individuals with anorexia and allowing young people to take their own lives through that format. So yeah, there are lots and lots and lots of issues, both in terms of training, in terms of finance within this element. And we just have a system that is just geared for for helping people physically, and so little training and understanding and money going into the things that are killing our young people.
You've mentioned that with research in particular as well, that there isn't enough funding also going into how to treat the psychological treatment of eating disorders. How can we stop them patients if we're not getting this research done? How can we make sure that patients aren't falling through the cracks in the health system? Are you advising everyone goes private? I don't know.
There's not the private element because it's been grossly underfunded. The difficulty is so at the Body Image Treatment Camp, we have a team of psychologists. In my experience, and this is it takes about at least 8 years of someone who's specialized in the treatment of a specific condition like eating disorders become a half-decent clinician. If you add on the training prior to that, you're looking at 15 years to get a half-decent clinician. When you go to the conferences, no one is expecting us to be able to meet that demand, even if there was the funding, because there's a backlog of 15 years, and the amount of specialists is tiny. So everything's looking at how do you digitalize it? How do you try and treat massive groups? How do you do this? Because there's just no funding. And in terms of research, what I found out recently, because as a company, we were trying to do research and had conversations, the HMRC gives tax breaks to enable for research for medical conditions, but mental health conditions they consider social science, and they specifically say it's of no value to the advancement of science to fund and research mental health conditions into anorexia or anything such as that. So, I mean, there's the system is broken at so many levels.
I mean, I have to say, like, when these conversations have started coming up, and I've also got a tween daughter, when these conversations just came up recently, I was kind of amazed to think that the conversations are exactly the same conversations around weight that they were 20 years ago, and it hasn't changed a bit. Like, the skinny equals happiness, that whole conversation around it, what we're trying to do. And I naively in me thought we've moved on, right? I kind of thought we know about nutrition in the meantime, we know about sport, we know about how, you know, mental health and all these things. And there I was thinking we haven't moved one step forward. In fact, we've actually gone further back, because now with the whole rolling in of social media and everything, I mean, what was I looking at? I was looking at magazines, right? But I had to go and buy the magazine. I didn't get it that often, yeah. And it wasn't just about that. But now, potentially with the algorithms and everything else, you can run down that rabbit hole for as long as you like. And I think, yeah, that absolutely shocked me, that just to think that it feels like nothing has changed.
It has changed, but it's going the wrong way. And I can explain why. I actually released an article on this a few weeks ago that's on our LinkedIn and website, which is, I'll give you the basic premise. It's looking at evolutionary psychology and the direction of evolution and how we're moving. So I'll kind of try and give a brief overview to understand. So mammals have been in existence, I think, around 230 million years, and humans 6 million years, and as Homo sapiens around 200 to 300,000. The crucial component across this board is that for us to survive, we've evolved based on safety in numbers. So a reptile has kind of a threat system as an emotional system to keep it alive, and it has a drive system that focuses on mating and feeding. Whereas a mammal has a third system, and that third system is safety. For them to survive, it requires interconnection. What I mean by that, I watched a couple of weeks ago with my kids the David Attenborough program, where a pack of female wolves were hunting a group of Icelandic bison. And for the wolves to be successful, everyone has to implicitly trust that everyone is going to do their job effectively. That means they've grown in a pack where they've been seen, heard, and valued, and implicitly rely that they know each one will have their back and do their job. It's not questioned. They feel completely interconnected and rely on each other. And if one of them is not doing their job, the whole hunt will fail, and they'll spread mistrust and it will fall apart. I used to be an elite athlete, and it's the same. If you're worried about your player on a team is going to miss a tackle or something like that, and you're focused on them, your game's going to fall apart, because that's what you're looking to exploit. The bison were doing the same. They form a circle, and as long as they all trust each other, the wolves can't get them. But the wolves are trying to get one to be scared and run and lose trust in the pack, or one to get antagonized and come out and attack and lose trust, and they'll kill them. So we have this perfect Mammalian interplay between attack and defense, and it's all based on this implicit trust. Our brain has wired for this. We've grown, Rupert Dunbar, is it Professor Rupert Dunbar, about Dunbar's number? So in terms of evolution, we have evolved to function at our best when we've grown in a small group where we have very, very powerful, trusting interconnection to other people. And if we have that, we then create balanced mental health, because confidence and self-worth comes from two domains. One, which is our intrinsic sense of worth, comes from our implicit knowledge that we are seen, heard, and valued by our family, community, tribe, and school within that, and that creates an implicit sense of value. And then the second is based on drive and social ranking. So really, there are four ways you create confidence. One is confidence to care and support for another, which feels empowerment. One is to feel the support and trust that of others. The other is, in terms of social ranking, is to move towards what's aspirational and through purpose and improvement. And the second is, so one's pushing ourselves up compared to ourselves and the other's pushing others down. Now, as a society, we've moved away from these small trusting communities, and even the way that our families function has moved away, because we've moved towards more competing, comparing. So the more, again, I'm not being capitalist in it, but it is part of that. So we've moved to more consumerist, capitalist cultures where the focus is on performance and kids doing well, and the parents kids doing well in school, and the parents achieving and bringing in money. And all of that is moving away from this seen, heard, and valued. That means that we're missing out on the 6 key things a child needs to thrive. I can go into that later if we want, but we're creating a culture that is that's creating more and more connections that are less authentic and strong. And it means in order to feel safe and secure, we rely more on competing and comparing. The problems then within that is with cultural interconnection. Historically, only 100 years ago, you were just comparing yourself to a handful of people in your village. And what you were comparing about was who was good at storytelling, who was fun, who was the matriarchal figure that you got looked up to, or who was this, that, and the other. Now you're comparing yourself to the most attractive or achieving person in 8 million. So we've become completely obsolete. So we've lost the ability to generate worth from all these other domains. And I can go on.
Is it then control then? Trying to regain control for what we blatantly don't have control for?
Yes and no. So there are 2 ways of generating control that fit within that drive eating disorders. You've got one way, which is to control shame. And the way you control shame is not by controlling it, is you generate empowerment. And that empowerment you create from achievement and pride. So what happens if you lack that interconnection is you get stuck with perfection is okay. It's unrelenting perfections and standards that's problematic. It's where it doesn't matter what you achieve, you get there and it's never enough. So you have to keep going. And that's what you're stuck with if you don't have a concrete sense of self-worth that you generate from your early interactions. So the people most vulnerable, shock, horror, are those that grow up who feel different. If someone grows up and feels isolated, different, they are the ones most vulnerable. So somebody asked me recently to check in my practice. On average, 85% when I checked with my clients I'm treating for severe and enduring mental health issues are neurodivergent. Why? You could argue the genetic argument, but I only reckon that adds a small percentage, and then I'll go into it. But the main element is the story of every one of these individuals. I grew up and I was made to feel different. At school, if I went to speak, people weren't interested. The teachers treated me like this. My peers treated me. I was made to feel different. And I looked around and I didn't see anyone like me. We still see the same with individuals in terms of the kind of gay and transgender community, same story. You can look in other elements. Who is most vulnerable? It's those that look around and say, I am the only one. If you look around and there are other people you can bond to and you might be different, then that's protective. But if you are the only one that you identify, then there's something wrong, damaged, broken. Your vulnerability factors are going to go through the roof. And the only ways you're going to have to cope is either through unrelenting standards or striving on numbing and cutting off. In bulimia, you have both. In anorexia, you tend to have both within that. And in the numbing and cutting off, you've got lots of strategies, including substance abuse, depression, self-harm. So all of it as a culture makes sense, but we're all heading in the singular direction, which we're still moving further and further away from authentic relationships and meeting the core needs of a child. And that's both in the home, in terms of parenting, that's both in schools and in community. We're just moving further and further away from it. And one of the main drivers, obviously, is marketing. Because the more inadequacy you can create, the more drive you create for people to consumerism, to buy and buy in. And that's what algorithms have hooked into. So, and this is why the westernized culture has, as it spreads around the world, you've got this dramatic, huge increase in eating disorders in Asia, in the Middle East. And it's as they're adapting these more westernized perceptions, you're getting this explosion in eating disorders.
Thank you.
I don't know if
yeah, that's
and I can keep going. But
no, it's absolutely fascinating. And I want to ask more questions. I'm just going to turn to Jenny quick because it links in quite nicely. Hi, Jenny. Can you tell us a bit more then about how you're starting to support, kids in schools to shift these conversations around body image and eating disorders?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's not an overnight thing, right? As Thomas has explained very well and very interesting. I found it really interesting and scary listening to that. Yeah, it's very worrying. But what I do is I go into schools and I do workshops. But what a one-off. So with schools, right, it's very difficult because of the time factor. So I try and do my best to fit into their schedule. But my next goal is, now I've got some more funding for the National Lottery, is to try and go in and do like more like intervention work, like 5-6 weeks, where I can really create change basically with them. Because I've noticed that, you know, going in and although I have goodwill and want to make change, 1 hour is not going to cut it. You know,
whatever you're talking about, right? Whatever.
no, exactly, yeah. And I knew that, and I went away and thought about it and thought, right, how am I going to do this and like tackle this? So they need deep sort of intervention, like over a few weeks. They, you know, we need to challenge like self-beliefs and, you know, look at social media, and as Thomas said about making meaningful relationships, like these young people just communicate via TikTok or Snapchat now. They don't go out. They go home, they come home from school, and they message each other over. That's how they communicate now, like Snapchat, TikTok. They're too scared to go out to a social club or go to, you know, sports, hobbies, and be in a place where they don't know someone. They can't do it. There's a lot of I see a lot of social anxiety now. That was never, when I was at school, you know, there wasn't a lot of that around. I'm seeing like a massive increase in that. But when I go into a school and I do, you know, do a body image talk, I speak about obviously my own journey. So I had anorexia very long term. It went on for over a decade. So I speak about that and how that affected my life and how it affected my body, how it affected my hormones, especially. That's something that I'm all really passionate about, because I didn't really think about my hormones in my 20s, and I wish that I did, because obviously now my 30s I've really suffered because of that. So I do speak about learning to appreciate what your body does for you, because I never did that. I saw my body as this. So I used to be a county, so I used to run for my county. I was very driven, very high achieving, perfectionist. I had all the boxes. I ticked all the boxes. all of that, high achieving, wanted to be the best. Nothing, if I wasn't achieving the best, I was never happy, constantly striving for more, thought that would make me happy. So I explained about that and what that did to me, and how I, you know, how I am content now, and how, you know, I'm just grateful that my body is still able to carry me through my sport that I still do today.
What I do fear, Jenny, is that people don't, kids, I'm saying, like when I was young, I wouldn't have wanted to listen to those kind of conversations. Like, you know, if someone's to say, if you don't eat, you know, what are the potential health benefits, what's going to happen to you when you're 30? I feel to a point there's a slight sort of veil that comes down, which is like you can't even begin to understand that conversation. And it's also sometimes when I feel like I'm talking to my daughter or whatever, I'm trying to tell her, you know, why it's important to eat and all the rest of it. But I wonder how you tackle that, because I think there is also a certain point which is like, oh, well, mum's going to say whatever she's going to say, or the doctor's going to say whatever, and I'm just going to do what I want to do anyway because I'm young and I can conquer the world.
Yeah, it's very difficult, because I thought my body was invincible, and I treated it like a machine. And people would say to me, you know, you say certain things and I just be like, oh, I'm fine, you know, I'll be okay, it's, you know, I can keep going. But you know, my body hit a point where it couldn't do that, and that is a really tough question. I think for young people, is getting them to kind of have a bit more flexible thinking, not this sort of black and white thinking. I was very much like that, and it's just being mindful of that as well. And it's a really great question, because when you feel like nothing's wrong, you just feel like you can keep going, right? So, but that's certainly not the case. The body won't, at some point, you know, something's going to happen.
But you know, that hits us when we do get to our middle age, when we realize, oh crap, that's because of this earlier on, and I did that, and I wish I'd have known back then. But if you go back and ask me when I was 14 why I wasn't eating, I would have just been like, I just don't need it, you know, it's fine.
Yeah, I think education around that will help them in terms of when they get older, around hormonal balance as well. Like if someone told me that in my 20s, I would have definitely, especially about hormones, I would have definitely stopped what I was doing.
I think that's a really critical point, isn't it, Jenny? Because it's that wider, more holistic education. You know, Penny and I have spoken about the tweens and our own experiences as kids. You know, as a little girl approaching puberty, you don't get taught that the the weight you're putting on, the body shape changes that you're getting is all part of your development. You are becoming a woman. You are getting, your body is changing because you are getting ready to be reproductive, essentially. Like, it's not, you know, that's, you know, just one example that came to mind. But then also the impact, you know, later on, you know, how you treat your body and how it can impact, you know, your, once again, how you're meant to function. And I think there's just a lot of conversations, I say conversations because I say there's an education element, but then it's also, and this is why Penny and I are quite passionate about what we do, is like, how do you carry on those conversations in other spaces, like the work you're doing, and you know, the how you speak, Thomas, as well, and the articles you're writing. But how do we get that? How do we get people to access that and consider these, this, it's not even perspectives, this is, you know, knowledge and experience, and it's and without having these conversations, and it's why we love doing it.
And the beliefs, the limiting beliefs that we as mothers and fathers are still passing down to our children, even if we're not aware of it, it's still so deeply ingrained that I have to sometimes stop myself in my tracks. I'm about to say something, and I'm like, what were you about to say? But I'm, you know, we're so used to shaming ourselves, and then we pass that down, right?
So something that, I mean, I work with children, adolescents, and have done for a long time within that. And one of the interesting things is that in my experience, I think getting slightly older means I'm less relevant. So I think I've got worse written at as I've got a bit older. When I was a lot younger, I think I was able to maybe engage on a relevance level. Now I'm a lot older. I think there's definitely that. I struggle a little bit with connection on that front. But at its core, it's much easier to treat body image issues in kind of later 20s than it is in those early years. And one of the elements is, if we can think about it from a developmental perspective, you said the age of 7, these children, in terms of body image, that isn't accurate. It's much younger. It's basically, it's happening. If you actually can see it, and I actually looked at it with my own kids, you've got children who are identifying the gender they aspire to have, let's say. So you've got young girls who, let's say, and it might be when they're around bigger girls, get excited, or bigger boys, but it tends to be one of the two. So you've kind of got this sense, even from a young age, that there's modeling. And that's how we're different from all other animals, is our capacity to model. So even pre-language, children are modeling off older kids who are modeling off the TV and the media and older kids. So even if you stop your kids engaging at all with any social media and hide them away and block all TV and magazines and everything, do everything perfect, they're going to go to school and they're going to model off to the kids. You're not going to stop it.
Yeah, it happened to my son at 4.
It's going to happen all the way through. So particularly, and we can look at how males and females are different, but females, that means that modeling is happening. So girls are going to look at, what is it I need to be like the bigger girls, and what is it important in that? And so the problem with that is, through that process, there is no questioning. All the mind is doing is trying to find the fastest ways to feel better. And what is it, if I identify as being a female, I need to be most aspirational? And you're going to copy that from what you're told within your culture. And that builds that social ranking mentality, and it drives that. It's only when someone's later, and you know, I have had conversations with adolescents sometimes and thinking about it. But let's imagine, how much of your self-worth and self-esteem do you want to be made up of your appearance? You know, if you were to think about that and growing up, you know, do you want to be objectified? Is that your call? Do you want self-esteem and worth from other aspects? And the younger ones are like, yeah, no, I don't care. If I'm pretty, then I'll have money and I'll be liked and I'll get everything I want. What are you talking about? You old man, you just have no clue. It's only when someone's got that little bit more insight later on, and I'm being derogatory to young people, and I don't mean it in that, but that is a common response that I might get from certain individuals within that, because they're not able to see that other element, that those thoughts, those debates, that discussion hasn't happened. The seed hasn't been sown to consider, actually, this is how I'm living, but is that in line with my values? How do I want to be in the future? How do I want to feel good? What are the things I want to be important to me? And it goes back again to what I talked about in terms of how much I want to feel good in relation to my relationships, my interconnections, my friends, what I give, within that format versus what I achieve. And it's that challenge that about beginning that dialogue, sowing seeds. And you don't know, I guess again, Jenny's probably much better placed within that larger institution, but if they're only given an hour, one session, I guess it's a start to sow some seeds. But if they can give you more time and you can sow more seeds and have more of those discussions, then you're going to help people at least be able to create that more informed element from early on, and hopefully begin to bring some change.
Yeah, I hope to, because the achieving thing, I do see that a lot. I see it a lot in private schools as well.
Yeah, that's
I mean, I went to a private school as well, so I kind of get it. I was that kind of, but it, I do think it sometimes helps hearing a story, like, because when I tell it and I say that I ended up with very bad depression because I was just never happy. So, that was obviously not very good, because that then impacted my motivation to do anything, and I never got anything done after that. So, but as Thomas said, we do live in this, in this consumer-driven world now, where we, feel like we need to have all this stuff, like, to be happy, and and this is a whole belief system that we need to deconstruct, basically, over time. It's huge. So the influence of sort of market is huge. Like, young people see their life, they see it on social media, they believe that will make them happy because they have all these things, or people on TikTok, explaining that they're, earning loads of money through TikTok. They just started this job by selling things, and then young people think, oh, I can go and do that. There was an article that came out actually, but the Daily Mail, I don't know if you saw that, Thomas, about young people are aspiring, like, to be, want to be TikTok famous. That's what they want as their job. And employment skills are going down because of that.
Won't need them soon, because there'll be AI TikTok influencers, so they'll be for free.
It's fascinating as well, like joining your two kind of experiences together. And Thomas, what you were saying is, so I said my son is a different build, and we're trying to fight. We've had to readdress our language, because you'd be like, oh, you're so like solid, but because he went in and he saw the people he looked up to or wanted his peers, and then he compared himself. We don't know, but then there was a comment made, and then since then that's stuck now forever. I mean, the comments have carried on. It wasn't just one. And then he'll go into the world and he'll start, it will stay with him, and it's that language, I think, that's so important, because, and how you not changed, but carrying on those conversations, and how you make sure, like, we've changed our language. I mean, we tried, oh, you're strong, and then he said, but I'm not strong. This kid's got muscles, and we're like, okay, how does a 6-year-old have muscles? But so then it's like, okay, well, we're really trying to, and we're like, you're healthy. That's all that matters, is you're healthy and you're great and you're happy but it's, that was a challenge. We didn't expect it in reception. We didn't expect it from our 4-year-old. We hadn't educated ourselves. We hadn't tried to learn what to do. We had to do it on the hoof. And I feel, in a way, a little bit grateful that he's had that experience, and we're learning quickly, and we can know that he might be susceptible to that. But that could have just happened he could have internalized it. And we did an inclusivity podcast the other day, and it was about people might seem fine, but actually, going back to the mental health issues and challenges and needs that people have, a lot of it is inside that you can't always see and to understand, to help. And I think that's where it's really important to, and you mentioned Thomas, and where you might not understand it, and you might be seeing someone, but actually at the end of the day, there's a person there, and they've got the same needs as we have, or worries and concerns, and it might just be showing up different. So there's a lot to it. And then we add in, as you're saying, Jenny, they go into the school environments, the social environments. They're not used to about the interactions. They're not even using words anymore, are they? They just interact sometimes with emojis, and then what that means, and if you use the right one, and it's a lot.
Yeah, I've also seen an increase in young people using skincare as well. That's another.
Oh God, don't start that.
No,
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Just wanted to put that out there because I think that's related to things like body image and
it's the beginning, I think, for the kids, actually. I think that they've got very clever at marketing exactly that age group. It's the first level of getting them into that trap. So, you know, 8, 9 years of age and trying to get them to buy beauty creams, face creams for 50 quid for a pot where it's insane.
I'm going to mention something that's useful when I think about this, about young men. And with the skincare, there's got something called a look maxing, which you may have heard of, which is a social media trend. When we think about, we've been talking quite a lot about young females, and what research shows, and I guess everyone still knows, is the primary way that women socially rank between each other is appearance. And that's just across the board. Whatever we like to think about moving in society, research shows everyone still knows. Woman walks into a room with other women, whatever it is, it's appearance is the primary way in terms of social ranking. With men, historically, it's been about attainment. So it's about what you can attain. And that might be money, job, car, watch. It might be how beautiful your partner is. It might be, and your body. What we're getting over that trend hasn't changed either. But in our young men, they're not able to attain money. They're not able to attain a job, a watch, a car, or a partner. So this is where we start linking towards incel. So the only way in our culture that men can now generate self-worth when there's none in that other domain is appearance. So that's going to be skincare, muscularity. It's going to be, when you look at some of the damaging things and the dangerous side of it, all of this element. So again, as a culture, we're creating this perfect environment to grow the issues that we're seeing manifesting in society. And the protective factors, and you can go and look at it in sport. And again, and you may relate to this from your own personal experiences, that you look at research and it shows how individual sport is a vulnerability factor for eating disorders and body image, while team sport is a protective factor. Why? Well, one relates to having to trust, and again, goes back to that point. I mean, I'm oversimplifying it to some extent, but those factors are there. So it's how do you protect our young people? It's about working on really strong, authentic, trusting relationships. One problem with that, and you deal with one of the main problems, because in terms of therapy and helping people recover, is where people have had the relational traumas, which everybody has in terms of which I'm working with, which means they've learned to mistrust others in terms of either because other people haven't had the capacity, desire, or been able to meet their emotional needs. That's the main element underneath. And on top of that, when you get additional, more obvious traumas, then those individuals have learned not to trust. So they're not going to want to engage in therapy. They're not going to want to trust people. And when they have relationships, they're still going to hold back and be independent. So this idea as a culture that, strong independent women or strong independent young people, for young people, that's a massive risk factor. If you've got a young person that's independent, that is hugely dangerous, because if they become independent, that is a sign that they've learned to mistrust the capacity for others to support them. You want highly interdependent young people that then, because they've internalized that support, they become independent in latter teens. If you've got an independent kid at a young age, alarm bells should be going off, and that's what you kind of. And that's why I've specialized in treating the back end of that. And how do you help people then learn to trust when, actually they've learned to thrive through being independent?
Yeah, and I think that's part of the dynamics of the community, isn't it? That if you're in a community, you're potentially asking for help, you're collaborating, you're working together, you're showing up together. There is that sort of support network that potentially you would be able to help support anyone who's struggling, and you would be asking for help. Whereas if that's fallen to the wayside and it's all about you and you're internalizing everything, then we've lost that part of the equation too. I'm curious to know, like, when you're recovering from eating disorders, are there communities? Does community exist that can support? I mean, Jenny, you've obviously gone through your own thing. Was there anything for you that was helpful?
No, there was no community. So I was sort of admitted to the Maudsley. This was a while back now, it's over 10 years ago now. But the thing was with me, what I do want to stress, that I wasn't actually ready to recover. So I was forced into it, which was not good. So I always say you can't force someone to recover.
What happened, Jenny, exactly to you? How did you get admitted?
So it was my ex-partner at the time. He tried to get me into a therapy. Obviously anorexia can be very manipulative. I didn't know what I was doing, and you know, I said I didn't want to go in. I lied about receiving the letter because I just didn't want to go in, the letter from the Maudsley. But in all honesty, he found out about it and literally just took me there, you know, to the actual centre. I think he thought he was helping me. But he said the worst thing he could have said to me was that you have an eating disorder. Again, language. That was the worst thing he could have said to me, because it was very threatening. And I was so mortified by that. And, you know, it wasn't a very empathetic approach, you know, to it. He didn't ask me how I was feeling. So it was the worst thing ever. But obviously I went to the Moors. I think I had about 20 sessions, so they give you 20 sessions, I think.
You weren't admitted, you were in and out.
So I should have been admitted when I first lost a lot of weight because my BMI was around 14. Yeah, but I didn't actually so well, basically my family didn't know what to do. So unfortunately anorexia, you know, I was like a dragon. I was lashing out at family, and I didn't believe I had a problem. And you know, my mum and dad, they're amazing, but they just didn't know how to deal with it, basically.
How would you? Yeah.
And I, you know, I don't remember actually losing, you know, that amount of weight. I don't remember any of it. It was a very stressful time. I did gain a little bit of weight, and then I went in. And I didn't want to be admitted, so I sort of travelled there and back and had my 20 sessions. But the thing was, they got my weight up a little bit. But as soon as I came out, I just dropped again. So, because I wasn't ready to recover, and I just felt like I don't think I gelled with the therapist I had. And another thing I want to say is that you got to trust your therapist. If you don't have trust, you can't have good results as well. So, I didn't feel comfortable with him. And also he was a male therapist as well, and I don't know if I was comfortable with that at the time. So, you know, I didn't get full recovery, and I just, as soon as I came out, that was it. I just lost weight again, and then I continued because everyone thought I was okay, you know, and they thought I was, you know, better. So, but I wasn't. I gained a little bit of weight, but not much. So, you know, and I was allowed to continue on my behaviours for many, many years. Unfortunately, it was sad because, you know, that's why early intervention is really important, because for me, it went on for a decade. It was so hard to recover from that because all the habits were so ingrained in me that it took so many years to like reverse that, because I had a history of over exercising, which I see in a lot of young people now as well. So, and that had a massive effect on things like my bone density and my hormones as well. So, and that took many years to reverse, and it took a lot of hard work and mental sort of work. So
there wasn't like a click moment for you when you thought, right, I've had enough of this cycle? Or
yeah, there was. There definitely was, because I had to reach out to a hormonal specialist. I don't mind saying, because I think it's important for young people to hear this, but I had to go on HRT. So I had to go on hormone replacement therapy. Because it was like either that, or it was like, well, you're getting osteoporosis. I was like, don't want that. So I think that was because I wanted sport. Like Tom said, I found something bigger than the disorder, because I wanted to get back into my sport. I also wanted to have a career. I wanted to build my own business. And I knew I needed to get better to build my own business. And I had to find that belief from within that I could do it. So that was and I wanted to help people one day. So that was my reason, really. I was like, right, I need to get back into sport. I want to run my own business. So at that point, it was just like, right, I have to go on this medication. I have to take hormones to get myself better. And that's what I did. But it was the worst 2 years of my life, I can say that.
And what was the worst part of that for you?
Pumping a load of hormone into someone that has completely numbed themselves off. And then you have to experience all these emotions coming back. It's like I was going through puberty. It was really odd, like an older age. It was like I had not experienced that yet, and I had to go from being unwell in this unhealthy body to being in this womanly body. And I was just like, oh my God, how am I going to navigate this? Like,
to change, you know, such a like physical, mental, and emotional change to just almost not be forcing you, but to happen to you, you know, like out of your control. I know you know, decided to take it. So was that the point where you were ready to recover? Because you used that phrase. Is that the point you were ready to recover?
yeah,
With ambition and purpose and
everyone needs purpose. Like everyone needs, I need purpose. I'm very driven. Like I need purpose. I'm someone that needs purpose. So, and I was like, I need to do this. Like I want to do that. I want to get healthy. I want to go out and see my friends again. I want my social life back. I don't want to be controlled by this illness anymore. I had enough, and I didn't want to have any.
Where you can positively put that energy as well, right? Like if you've got something good to put that drive and motivation into, that can direct you.
Yeah, definitely. And I had that. And, you know, again, I wanted so badly to get back into sport. And my body literally got to that point where it was like, no more. It was just like, it's done. Like, you know, sport had gone out the window. I had no energy for anything. I wasn't sleeping. I had depression, anxiety. I had a really bad hormonal imbalance. And it was just like, hold on, why do I want to continue down this road? I've got to change it up. Like, and that's what I decided to do. So I'd hit that breaking point. So
you mentioned that anger, and that's really, really interesting. And I know that Thomas, you've said that's something in particular that you get involved with, because I think it's a huge part of the thing, right? Having that control and then someone trying to take that control away from you and you having to defend, I suppose, what your lifestyle is. Or where are we going with that?
Okay, I'll talk you through it a bit. Right. So one of the core features of mental health conditions, and anorexia is no different within that, is, I mentioned before, there's kind of 6 key things a child needs to thrive. I'll give you some, I won't give them all because it will take ages, but I'll give you some of the basics. One of the first one is, in order to thrive, a child needs to be seen, heard, and valued. What that means is that there has to be a place where they talk, that people listen and encourage them to talk. And that needs to run, that's around the dinner table or at school, and at school really, and within their peers. So this sense that they learn to be able to talk, and then what play is about is not only to be assertive and assert opinions, but also then to be reflective and listen, to have these skills of being heard, and then modeling that, giving opinions, listening and reflecting. Whether that's physical play and verbal play, that's an essential part. Without that, then a child then learns to suppress that. They lose that confidence to talk, to assert themselves, because what you get is that capacity to assert gets fused with shame and or fear. So what they then learn is, if I try and talk, instead of feeling empowered, they feel disempowered. They feel shame or fear. And you get this, then the second element that a child needs to thrive, or part of the same one, is their emotional needs met. So if a child goes through adversity at school and they've learned that talking about that isn't a positive experience when they get home, e.g. because they're worried to burden very stressed parents, or that the parents are needing to focus on another sibling, they don't want to take that care away, or parents basically don't seem to be interested in talking to that child or have the tools to do that, then that adverse experience gets encoded in that memory as an isolating experience, and the child doesn't learn how to know their emotions, let alone regulate them. A child that goes home and has learned, if they talk about their problems, people listen. People talk through the problem. They don't necessarily try and fix it. It's not helicopter parents. It's not trying to fix it, but listening and empathizing and understanding. The memory gets re-encoded as the experience is that someone was there and supported him through it, even though they weren't at the time, by replaying it through in a supportive way, and by talking about emotions. Say, wow, that must have been scary. And how did you feel? Oh, that made you feel sad. Yeah, I bet it did. The prefrontal cortex, the reflective part, starts to build neural pathways to the limbic system, and the child starts to understand how they're feeling, and they can identify feelings in their body, and they can start to manage feelings. If they don't have that ability, what you have is this vacuum of nothing, 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 rage, or nothing, 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 panic, or nothing, 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 overwhelming tears and sadness. And the bit before that gets fused with sadness and fear. So you have this fusing of emotions. So instead of being able to be angry, you just end up feeling ashamed or fearful, instead of being, and in this, you can't process then your adversity in life, because whenever you feel sad, you feel ashamed. I know from my experiences, I wasn't able to cry. The last time I cried before I was 30 was the first proper fist massive brawl I was in. I think I was 9. And I remember crying in the changing room afterwards, not from being attacked or fighting back, but just from the emotions, just all the blend of emotions. And at that point, in the world that I lived and grew up in, there's no way you could show emotions or ever cry again as a male in that environment. And I didn't. And I never cried. It was in my it was late 20s, 30s, I remember. And it wouldn't matter what had happened to me. There was no way I could have cried. It was so fused with fear and shame, and that what it was to be a man, you just, no chance. So this fusing of emotion is linked with all of this. But so if you're going to help someone recover, if they need to confront adversity, whether that's external, whether that's food, whether it's their inner critic, whether that's the sport, if they don't have the ability to assert themselves and say, in this sense, and feel empowered to confront that, then they can't recover. And again, you've got different ways that anger is manifested. If anger is linked with our drive system, which is this is based on Professor Paul Gilbert's work within this evolutionary psychology, when you get anger fused with that sentence, then our drive for anger is about social ranking and dominating. So it's anger to dominate, control, oppress. When anger is linked with our containing system, it's more like a mother protecting her cubs. It's assertiveness to protect. So it's this empowerment. I've got you. I'm going to protect you. Get away from them. I've got you. So, and it's that assertiveness that we're losing in our culture, and in the other. So we're getting more desire to dominate, suppress, judge, and attack people to feel good, and less to protect people. And this empowerment, so working with all these mental health issues, particularly as a culture, we have an issue with women in this, that where our young women, we don't want them to be boisterous. Don't be bossy, don't be boisterous. You need to be patient. Where our boys, historically, we allow them to be boisterous. Yeah, they're just boys. Yeah, we're teaching our boys to learn how to play and be boisterous and manage aggression and learn where the boundaries are, hopefully, if you allow them to. If you don't allow them to, they're not going to learn where the boundaries are. So it's either going to be fused with shame. When they try to be assertive, they feel ashamed or fearful, and then they either just hold it in until they explode, or they don't have capacity. So that's an essential part of what you're doing in treatment, is you're trying to help individuals learn to be able to do that. And it's also essential for parenting, and management and leadership, so the work we do in that. If you're not confident to be stern, if you then try to be playful, the difference is if I'm stern and within that, it's like, right, you need to, right, guys, I got the boss last time gave it to me in the neck. I need you guys to be with me on this. I'm going to take you down with me if I go down. Versus, hi guys, I got really troubled last time and I need you all behind me this time. If I haven't got confidence to assert myself within it, and it's the same with kids. If you can't set the boundaries, because it's bedtime, come on kids, it's bedtime. Yeah, Dad, right, yeah. How well have they hidden the remote control this time? It's, oh, come on guys, where's the remote? Versus being able to shift into that more effectively. And these are skills that we're losing. And none of these are skills that my clients who work with have. They don't have any of these abilities, which inhibits their capacity to recover, because what they do is they do have these in some elements. I know Jenny mentioned we're able to, I don't know about in other domains, but you're very much able to be assertive if someone told you to eat. And then you're practicing your assertiveness, but maybe not about you, but other people, when I'm building on assertiveness with someone with anorexia, that's one that I might say, right, I've got a bag of croissants here. I'm going to make you eat them now. And they're like, no, you're not. Brilliant. Let's have some more of that. And where else can you be assertive? What other domains can you actually do, within this sense? I'm going to feed somebody else anorexia a croissant. What are you going to do? No, you're not. I'm going to stop you. Good. Okay, let's work with another domain. So these are, they're incredibly important skill sets. And anger, as a culture, we really look at as a negative contribution. Anger, people confuse anger and violence, or anger and aggressive. They're not the same thing. Anger is the emotion that we feel that empowers us. What we do with that is the behavior. And if you have healthy emotional regulation and given tools, that becomes a choice. If you're not given those tools growing up, it's not a choice, because you end up reactive. Nothing, nothing, nothing. And then you flip into your learned response. if you teach children to regulate their emotions and help them, then they feel this is anger. This is great. I feel empowered with this, hopefully. What do I do with it? Do I assert myself? Do I have to do that physically, verbally, to have an opinion? Do I hold it in and ask to see them later and have a discussion when I'm calm myself down? And these are all life skills that we're losing as a society, but are imperative to help people recover.
I'd like to know when you actually then did cry at 30. Have you cried a lot since? Because I think that's super important that, you preach, you talk, do what you preach.
I do. And I'm actually, I do. And that's the beauty about the work I do, is that every day I get to support people through their darkest places and walk through it with them and emotionally support them and empathize and connect and relive and support them through those and change and through that process every day. And, arguably it's not appropriate for a clinician to cry, and most of the time I don't, but it's on the edge. They see it's on the edge. I'm there. I'm in that. And at times I let the tear out a little bit. And, but, that's an important part of the process as well. And it's to live, breathe and experience all of that with your client, to walk through it. That's the definition of compassion. And that's what is intrinsic to really helping, particularly the most damaged and of individuals who haven't had any of that. People haven't walked through that adversity, they haven't trusted, people haven't wanted or had the capacity or enabled them to. So yeah, I do cry on a regular basis.
Amazing. So I wanted to end with our tween question today. And as we were just talking sort of about opening up to emotions, maybe that's where you're going to come in and give your answer, Thomas. But our question is, how can I support a friend if I suspect they're suffering from an eating disorder? And maybe a big piece of advice there would be to be able to talk to them. I don't know what you would suggest.
Go first, Jenny, or?
Yeah, sure. So how to support a friend
with an if you suspect there's something going on.
I would say don't base the conversation around food, weight or appearance, first of all. So don't say, I think you might have an eating disorder. Approach them with I statements saying, I'm concerned about you. How have things been going? You seem distant. You don't seem yourself lately. I've noticed a change in your energy levels. You don't seem yourself. Everything okay? Those kind of things are good to start off with.
Or like you're acting differently, or there's times where you've changed what you do. Like if it was something, if it was say about food, but you don't want to say, you could like infer, oh, you've changed what you normally do and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. Just it's not directly mentioning anything around appearance, shape, weight or their food. It's indirectly asking them that that they've noticed some changes within them and they're not being themselves. And if they, obviously a lot of people who have an eating disorder, I myself, I was very in denial that I had an issue. That doesn't mean that you don't keep going back to them and keep checking in with them. They might not open up about it at first because they're going to be feeling a lot of guilt, shame or anxiety about their behaviors. So I just keep checking in with them and making sure that they're okay, and that's all you can do, because you can't force someone to speak about something. They have to be ready for it.
And be with them, like it goes back to that compassion, be with them and understand that they might not be okay and that you're there for them, and you can try and understand if they want to talk. So yeah, that's really powerful.
And again, I think it goes back to you sort of saying, at the end of the day, the individual's got to make that decision. They want to get better themselves. So you can offer the support, you can give them the resources, but at the end of the day, that's got to be their decision, right?
Yeah, you can't force someone to recover. They have to want it. They have to want it for themselves. Otherwise, you're not going to get full recovery. They have to want it. Like, I wanted it. That's why I got full recovery in the end.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness. Otherwise, it would be And Thomas, would you have anything to add to that?
I mean, exactly what Jenny said within that. When you define compassion, it requires empathy first before action. People go solution focused. We've got a culture of it's the easy option, because if I go solution focused, I don't have to feel your distress. You don't have to feel it. We can just fix it, right? Whereas compassion is to it's to ask and understand. So whether it's eating disorders or self-harm, the first thing is be able to spot that, like, what's going on, to be able to feel it, live it, and try and understand what someone's going through. And then through that process, within that, if they then admit to those kind of elements, then it becomes, what do you do with that? And there is an issue there, which is, if you're the only one that knows and you're carrying that, that's also then an issue. So, and this is where you might want to ask them for help. I've got a friend who's got an eating disorder. They've just told me, what do you think I should do? But again, it's about your values. Once you understand it, you know, it's then going back to that person and saying, I'm really worried now. You've told me this. I don't know what to do. It's worrying me. I think you need to ask for support. Do you think you can? But you don't want to then be holding that risk only on your own, because that then causes an issue for itself. But the solution to that, I can't give one solution. I guess then it's about asking for help yourself, and then going and getting support to then help your friend and figuring out a way to do that. But exactly what Jenny said is that first, it's just, you know, don't try and fix it. Just try and typically understand, because you don't know what to fix yet. You've got a suspicion. Just try and support them emotionally. Be there. Be that support structure for them. Be a friend, and then go from there.
I think what's been so insightful tonight is that it all links back to people's mental wellness. I try and stop, not always say health, because that means it's good, you know, or there's not, but it's that wellness. And it's like, I think this advice can go for anyone who you think is struggling, and however it's manifesting. And I reminded so Penny and I both have coaching you know, side hustles that we're doing alongside this. And I reminded a client the other day about, you know, the how are yous. And actually, if you really want to know how someone are, like you said, Jenny, ask again, you know. And I actually was saying it conversely to him, because he you know, he was, you know, struggling with, you know, interactions, and I was like, don't ask how people, if you don't want to know, don't ask. And then I gave him the example is, but if you do really want to know, you know, people aren't always such a are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. It's such a typical answer now. It's just casual, but you have to go deeper, I think, is, you know, what we're saying, and really, you know, keep touching him.
Yeah, and that value of friendship or support in any way, that if we can do, you know, we can do more as a bigger whole than we can if we, you know, keep retreating and go into more an isolation position. So I feel like we've just sort of started this conversation, and I feel like there's so much to talk about. But thank you so much for getting us thinking today and sharing your perspectives. For people at the Informed Perspective who are listening today, thank you so much for being with us. It's an important conversation, but one that is definitely worth starting. Everybody tells a story of strength, resilience, and uniqueness. Let's challenge those narrow standards and celebrate all forms of beauty, not just the ones the media tells us to admire. It's vital to remember that body image struggles don't exist in isolation. They affect those families and communities we've spoken about today. Together, through awareness, compassion, and open conversation, we can foster a future where body acceptance is the norm and not exception. If you're struggling with body image or eating disorders, please know you're not alone. Reach out, seek help, and be gentle with yourself. Recovery is possible, and so is self-love. We all have a role to play in creating a kinder, more inclusive world where everyone feels seen, valued, and accepted. If you found value in this episode today, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more conversations that matter. We want to extend our heartfelt thanks to our incredible guests today, Thomas Midgley and Jenny Tomei, for sharing their expertise and their compassion and personal insights with us. We'll be posting links to their work alongside this episode, so please check those out to learn more. Remember, body image struggles don't happen in isolation. They ripple through families and communities. Becoming aware of limiting beliefs and breaking the cycle is how we create kinder, more accepting spaces for everyone, especially young people. Thank you for joining us on The Informed Perspective. Until the next time, keep honoring your incredible selves. Take care, be well, and keep informing those perspectives.
You guys.
Thanks, guys.